did a few other things this month besides music. I got on my bike one day and I rode to San Francisco. Well, I didn't exactly ride to San Francisco. I got on my bike and I rode to the train station down here in the peninsula, put my bike in the train car and took it up to San Francisco, and I rode around up there. I wrote about that in my art journal. October 8th entry, you will find the first part of my short series called Citybound. And this first entry was Citybound, car-free to San Francisco. I took Thursday off and biked over to the local train station to catch the 10:14. Like most romantics, my heart does not yearn for city sights. And at the same time, there's something awfully intriguing about the pace of totally urban life, for which I get a tremendous craving every once in a while. I don't enjoy city driving, and there's no point in it when I've got a lovely wide-tired, 3-speed bike to companion me, and a train station that's a 5-minute ride from my house. 10 if I stop and talk to a few neighbors along the way, which I usually do. Peggy had a bag of lemons out, so of course I stopped at her house too. One of those will come in handy when I make my London loaf this week. And I did make London loaf later on in the week. And I have the recipe for it out in my art journal, and there's a link to it on this page, that recipe. I use a bread machine to make dough. It's a lot faster, and then I bake it in the oven. Back to the article. I made the San Francisco train with the necessary extra 5 minutes to convince the ticket machine it should accept my debit card, popped my pink cruiser bike on board, and settled into the bike car, listening to the clackety-clack backbeat of the train starting up. Part 2 I published on Saturday, October 9th, and you can read it at the Art Journal site, and of course see the pictures out there too. Biking the Embarcadero is the title for Part 2. It's got a reputation for hills, but San Francisco still has a good stretch of flat, bikeable streets. I swung out of the train station at 4th and Townsend and headed out around behind the baseball stadium. From there I merged onto the Embarcadero. The old piers are on the water side. Many of them have been gussied up as businesses and shops. Across from the water is the intensely downtown business district. And I have a picture there of a man sitting working, and I had some fun with Photoshop because the scene reminded me of going to Disneyland. I happen to love Disneyland. So I had a little fun with him, and I wrote, "This guy thinks he's working hard on his cell phone, but I see what I see." And I guess you'll see it if you go out to the site. And then I said, "This place has always reminded me of Toontown." Part 3 was published on October 11th, and the title for that article was The Ferry Building. Pedaling up and around the Embarcadero took me to the ferry building. You can have your Coit Tower or Fisherman's Wharf. This place represents San Francisco for me. There was a wooden ferry house here since 1875. The building dates from 1898. It's where people who worked in the city crossed on ferries from Oakland and Marin to get to work each day. It's also the place where anyone traveling across the country by train ended up. A few people still commute in by boat these days, but most drive. When I stopped and locked up my bike here, I could hear some of the ferrygoers from another era scrambling up from their benches and rushing through the doors to cross over the Embarcadero out onto Market Street to work. A group of women walked past me laughing and talking. The dark-haired one, Emily, is a telegrapher. Later on this morning, she'll be in touch with her fellow op in Chicago, my great-aunt Mabel. Once they finish their business with the transfers, they'll chat on the wire about Mabel's handsome new male friend. Then Emily will instruct her chum to make the next move in that ongoing chess game they've been playing for a few weeks. If ever there was a natural time portal, it's this building. The final part of the series is Citybound, Angels and Crocodiles, and it was published on Thursday, October 21st. I wonder if everybody has one animal that really scares them, but secretly they find it kind of intriguing. For me, it's crocodiles. Crocodiles seem like a much bigger deal than alligators, which are equally deadly. I hunt crocs out at the zoo, the aquarium, and I even tried to find one when I went to Costa Rica. I pick up any book or magazine with a nature story showing a picture of an innocent flamingo fluttering down, looking for her shrimp. You know the next picture. Snap! My favorite #1 ladies detective agency story is the one where Mama remotes way. Hey, wait a minute. Maybe you haven't read that one yet. Go straight to your library and look up Alexander McCall Smith. Then sit down with a big cup of red bush tea and don't expect to get up until you finish the first book. Where was I? Oh yeah, crocodiles. The same urge that draws me to crocodiles likewise interests me in cities. Not something I really want to be close to, yet so intriguing. As you may recall from the previous 3 episodes, I took a day off and rode my bike to the train station and on up to San Francisco. From there I biked along the Embarcadero and eventually went out to Fort Mason. The road from Fisherman's Wharf past Ghirardelli Square up and over the hill was crowded with people visiting for Fleet Week. This event is a demonstration of the United States naval power and an excellent military recruitment tool. Everybody had their noses turned skywards as the Blue Angels demonstrated their prowess. No doubt about it, their skills are awesome. I thought about crocodiles a lot while I was watching those pilots. The last article that I'm going to share with you in this podcast, I published on Halloween, October 31st. It's called Romancing Halloween in the High Country, That Old Chestnut. One good thing about spending my Halloween gleaning chestnuts up at Skyline Chestnut Orchard, and follow after that I have some directions on how to get there and a link to the Skyline Chestnut Orchard, was that it finally forced me to find out why people say, "Not that old chestnut," when somebody tells an old joke. Well, since I come from a family that repeats their jokes, and I like to hold with this cultural tradition, I've had my chestnuts raked out of the fire quite a few times. Yeah, that's what's known as mixing metaphors. According to the web write-ups that I found, this line has to do with an old has-been actor of the English Regency era who overdid his storytelling. When he mixed up one of his standard stories, he was corrected by his hearers, who had heard the story so many times that they knew, no, it involved a chestnut tree. Another good thing about going up there was that I had an excuse to drive up to Skyline. That's the slow-moving highway that runs along the top of the Santa Cruz Mountains here in the San Francisco Bay Area on a gorgeous fall day. I should say that it's a slow-moving road when I'm driving on it. And yes, I did pull over whenever it was safe. Also, I had a few disgruntled locals shoot past me when I couldn't find pullouts fast enough. It must be exciting to be so important that you are always in a hurry. Maybe. And on top of that, I learned the trick of twisting the chestnut burrs in my hands to display 3 glossy nuts. If I'd only wanted a half a pound or maybe a pound of these little beauties, I could have just scavenged for what was laying out in the debris under the trees. That's what the kids nearby were doing. They were delighted to show me how to gnaw open a nut with my teeth. I'd always had the impression you had to roast chestnuts before you wanted to eat them. And actually, after trying the kids' technique and eating the nuts raw, I still think that. But don't tell the kids. I spent about an hour and a half twisting open the prickly husks and plopping nuts in my container till I'd amassed nearly 6 pounds. Now comes the challenge of incising them, soaking them, roasting them, and hulling them. I asked for advice from a few of the people I chatted up as we scavenged cautiously around each other, never wanting to invade each other's patches, but enjoying the company. A couple people I talked to are regulars. Each has their own techniques for removing the woody hulls and ideas for cooking them that had never occurred to me. A woman who I think might not have been here long from Korea boils them and eats them plain. She was interested when I suggested she try making them into soup. My gleanings cost me just under $30. The point is not to save money over buying them in the store. The point is the pleasure of gathering your own historical chestnuts from trees that are likely nearly 150 years old. And that's based on my talk with the orchard farmer, the rancher, who takes care of this grove. And he told me that he had done some ring counting from dead wood. It was a perfect California fall day. Clear air, blue sky, slightly breezy, no need for the jacket I had tied around my waist. And it was terribly romantic to imagine spending a few weeks in the fall, harvesting chestnuts and then processing them at home. But I know the real reason I enjoyed my harvest was that it makes me appreciate how much autumn work I don't really have to do. I've got some other art journal entries you might enjoy. In the month of October, out at my art journal, also known as a blog, at http://simpleromantic.blogspot.com. You might also like to look back through some of the previous months. I have a lot of pictures out there as well. I also have a companion blog about my work learning the Objective-C language. Objective-C being the Apple version of C++, which I need to learn in order to learn to write apps for the iPad, the iPod, or the iPhone. And I have some connections between my art journal, particularly my time travel themes that are in my art journal, and my my study journal for learning Objective-C. So if you're interested in my Objective-C experiences, you might want to visit that blog, and that would be http://a new objective, that's all